I never want to do anything interesting.
I don't think that's a fair criticism.
Fuck me next to your dead mom, then.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Underrated, a podcast where we talk about films that are underrated, underappreciated, and ones that have just slipped under the radar and passed most people by. As always, I am one of your co-hosts here, Derek McDuff, and joining me as usual is Ariel Ortiz.
Hello.
Alan Torres is taking a little bit of a break this week, but we are joined by another guest, a special guest from the Matt and Mark movie show, Matt himself. How's it going, Matt?
Hi, thank you guys for having me. This is awesome.
Thank you for coming on. Yeah, your show is great. I've been on it, so I had a lot of fun with that. So once I had an opportunity to, we needed to get a guest on. You were the first person I thought of. So, and it's interesting that you're here, kind of filling in for Alan, because this is such an Alan pick. It's kind of perfect. So I think he's a little sad that the time he missed is this movie, because I know he loves this movie. But yeah, this is I'll kind of describe it before we get too much into it. It's a 2011 slasher film written and directed by Adam Wingard. Written and edited by Adam Wingard. Written by Simon Barrett. With kind of a smaller ensemble cast. It's one of those kind of smaller budget slasher movies that kind of shows up, does all right. The budget was, it's only $1 million budget, so it's hard to not make money on that. But yeah, it just kind of never really got too big and popular. But I'll let you take it from here, Matt. And why don't you tell us, when I pitched you that, come on Underrated, what show do you want to, or what movie do you want to talk about? And this was your pick.
Yeah, this is almost always my pick when anybody even says, hey, I'm looking for an underrated movie or a movie I haven't seen in a while. And regardless of whether or not that person who asks me watches horror, Your Next is always the thing that pops into my head, simply because I think it's a movie that if you're, it kind of, to me, it's like many flavors at once. If you're not a horror fan, it will appeal to you. If you're a horror fan, you're in the bag for it. And I think, is it okay to spoil a little, just sort of something here in this opening statement here?
Yeah, we can spoil. If you haven't watched it, stop right now. Go watch the movie. It's only 90 minutes long, and then come back, because we're a full spoiler podcast here.
Thank you for that. Well, because the reason I say that is because the thing I often sell people on is, hey, look, this is the first movie, I think, that truly weaponizes the final girl. She's not just a survivor. She's not just somebody who endures and goes through this. It's funny because you're seeing now Laurie Strode in the new Halloween series. They're sort of trying to retroactively do this to her. To me, You're Next, it's just it's a horror movie, kind of. I tell people it's like a secret Rambo movie that happens to star a final girl in a horror movie. And I'm like, if that sounds exciting to you, you're going to love this movie. I was also laughing too because I listened to you guys' Begin Again episode, and I was like, oh wow, you guys are starting off the new year on this nice optimistic note, and I'm coming in with this movie that sends a crossbow through your window.
The way, I just real fast, the way, because it's kind of 10 minutes, which is okay, there's table setting, and there you see a little bit of oh, maybe somebody's getting murdered, but then it's just horrible people talking to each other. And this guy what's that in the window? And then boom, crossbow through the face, right, usually these things will be a slow burn, somebody's gonna get murdered, and then maybe somebody will find it. And it's no, fucking crossbow right through the window into this dude's head. We're off to the races, and I fucking loved that.
Yeah, it really does. And that's, see, exactly that reaction is what I tell people. It's if this is, to me, this is a great midnight movie to see with a rowdy crowd, cheap beer. You're gonna have fun. You're gonna cheer. It's great. And there are some nasty surprises. So yeah, that's why I think it appeals to a bigger demographic than I think you would think this movie kind of does on paper. And that's why it randomly, this movie came out. Well, it was supposed to come out in 2011, and then they held back for 2 years. I don't know why. And so people didn't get to see it until 2013. I feel like that's always the story for a movie like this. Somehow, it just keeps kind of getting pushed further on the shelf, and we move away from things. And, especially when I see a movie like Ready or Not, which is a fantastic movie. When I see a movie like Ready or Not come out, I'm like, man, it almost feels like the sister movie to Your Next. In a way.
That's exactly
what it got a lot of attention, and Your Next really doesn't. So if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. It's awesome. Don't watch it with your parents or something, but like just watch it. You'll have a great time.
Yeah. No, I felt very much like watching this and knowing that it came out before Ready or Not. Like I was like, this is like very much like Ready or Not, especially with the main character. In Ready or Not, she kind of starts like not knowing like what the heck's going. I think that's just kind of like ties into like she cannot believe what's going on but she does eventually become like a weaponized like she capable person which you like and then but with this one she just because of her past as a survivalist just jumps into that mode and I really did enjoy it. It was kind of like I was like of course the Australian would know what to do kind of thing too. Because
They're
like,
dealing with the giant spiders and pterodactyls and shit every day.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah, but I did like the backstory that they gave her, and even just like very quickly like going through it, and I really liked like they didn't like they made it understandable and really digestible to kind of get that okay this is why she's like this and oh no she hasn't told her new like pretty new boyfriend like you know they're boyfriend girlfriend but yeah like it's definitely is something that would be brought up like in like you know the second year or whatever of dating um but yeah I did really enjoy it. I was expecting like a scarier movie which I was like all right I was gonna just suck it up. I'm not one too much for horror movies. I'm barely starting to like kind of like start watch more and more horror movies but I think of this more as a thriller movie. But yeah, I enjoyed the heck out of it. I wasn't expecting like the second twist to happen, which is very much that's why I was like now watching this you know, after seeing Ready or Not, I'm like, did they like yeah, did were they like kind of directly inspired by these twists, you know, and stuff? Because you kind of have a similar twist, the second twist in the Ready or Not. Um
Don't
but
spoil
yeah, I
Ready or
did
not.
yeah, don't spoil Ready or Not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did enjoy it. I was like when it started and the mystery kind of started. I really do like that there was very much mystery connected to the story and like trying to figure out like yeah, why are they being killed? Like technically they are rich, but you know it's more so it's kind of like he was just an accountant for like you know like I guess like the CIA government
It's
kind
like
of
a
like
Halliburton,
organization.
I think, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and then I thought more so that, like, it was like, something was gonna be up about the mom because, like, going in, I thought, "Okay, this like, a horror movie?" Like or, like, I know there was, like, home invaders and stuff like that, but, like, I thought it was gonna be more tied to the mom because they gave, like, that kinda, like, off-candid, like, comment that, "Oh, yeah, your mom" like, my mom's, like, kinda, like, has problems and stuff, and I really thought that the mom was gonna become, like, a bit more of a, like, an important character because of that, like, you know, kinda, like, reading into that. But yeah, for the acting wise, definitely, like, something that you would expect from this kind of movie. I think I prefer I liked the main girl in this movie, but I kinda like the acting of since we're going on with the comparisons of Ready or Not, I kinda like the acting of Ready or Not a little bit more, but I think that was because that one, like, they knew what they were a bit more and like kind of played into that kind of zany craziness whereas this one it was a bit more grounded like the psychoticness of the murderers the killers was very much like kind of like creepier like especially with the main like I guess kind of like the head of the killers like how he was just like
Brendan
breathing
Flowers.
hardly. It was what? He wasn't Brandon Flowers.
No, you said the head of the killers. I'm sorry. I just
Oh, okay.
But it kind of works. That guy does
Yeah,
look a little like Brandon Flowers.
yeah. Well, no. I guess it's the other one, like the one that that had his brother killed. But like when he killed the sister-in-law, I was like, oh, or like even that too. Like I love the mystery of this movie because like even that you're like, oh, they're just like crazy psychotic. They want to kill people because he kind of like breathes heavily, and you think like, oh, is this like an enjoyment to him and stuff like that? So like you kind of like there's multiple like trains that are on the track of like which one is it gonna be. And I did enjoy. I think like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because of what track they ended up going with, because it made sense and it was a bit more like, I feel like, yeah, this is a bit more grounded version of Ready or Not kind of thing. Like they are sisters, but I think this is more the more sensible sister in a way. Yeah.
Right. This is the
Yeah, well,
sister that like bought a Lexus and has like a nice house and like is like, I'm a career lady, I've got it all. Yeah, she's that sister.
Yeah, no, but I really loved it too. Going into it, I wasn't really sure what this was going to be, and I think it's interesting that you guys both kind of described it as like not exactly a horror movie, because it's not really. It's like kind of a slasher, but it deals with action movie tropes, I think, a lot, and I think that the main character is almost an action movie protagonist more than like the kind of traditional final girl, and I think that's right on with what you said about like her kind of like taking charge and not being the victim. She's like, no, fuck this. I'm gonna like do some Home Alone traps and like fuck these guys up and do all, like be the survivalist. And I really dug that. But the thing that really did it for me was, I think that this movie, and I think this is what you're kind of talking about, Ariel, where you're like, oh, it seems more grounded, but at the end, I think it gets a little bit more not zany, but kind of just like, oh, this is a different thing than we were initially watching. And I really appreciated that, because at the beginning it seems like, oh, this is just kind of like, these are just crazy people coming out to kill them. These are the Hills Have Eyes. These are the crazies. It's Michael Myers. It's Jason Voorhees. It's just the faceless evil.
More so the strangers. Another classic thriller.
It's the faceless evil coming to get you, right? And like, I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's what kind of movie we're in for. And it just kind of reminded me of, I was recently in Seattle and I took a visit to the Museum of Pop Culture, and I think it was Guillermo del Toro. Somebody in like the horror exhibit, there was like a little video of them talking, and they were like, there's two kinds of horror stories essentially. There's the ones where it's like, you're sitting at the campfire and the tribal elders like, what's you've got to be afraid of is what's out there. That's the scary thing. That's a lot of horror stories. And that's how this one is set up to be. And then he's like, the second kind of horror story is like, what's actually scary is like what's inside, what's like here at the campfire. It's yourself, it's the people around you. And that's what this movie is like, kind of like when it does the twist reveals, like, no, the twist isn't like the quote unquote other out there. It's the people, like, it's your boyfriend, it's his family. They're the ones who are coming to kill you. And I love that little switcheroo that it does on you, where it's like, because those, as he pointed out in the museum, is like those stories are so much harder to tell. Mm-hmm. And like, I think that it really masterfully, like, just kind of did the old switcheroo on you, like making you think, okay, this is just the generic, like the bad guys are coming out to get you, but it's like, no, you can't trust people. Fuck people. Like, these people are all horrible. And just, I love just because I also love the way it ends really darkly, but like that I'm always talking about bittersweet endings. It's definitely a bittersweet ending where it's like, yeah, everybody gets fucking killed. She's technically alive, but she gets shot in the shoulder and she ends up killing a cop. And that like darkness and the dark humor that it ends with, where it's like smashes the cop's head. And it's like, there's like little lines where he's like, I did it all for you, and like we're an essential part of this, and all that stuff I thought was so good. Or when like Z is like, fuck me next to your dead mom, and he's like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I loved absolutely all of that. This is a perfect little like 90-minute slasher. Like, this is what I want from slasher films, because I have not really been a big slasher movie guy my whole life. But the way that it just tweaked it just enough to kind of give it this really interesting vibe, and to kind of make it more about an inward horror than just kind of an outward horror, was really interesting, I thought.
Yeah, I also love that, in the spirit of you saying, like, right, so it doesn't feel like a horror movie, right, at its core, but it's just so funny because if you look at, I've become a big Adam Wingard fan, and this is really what started it for me. And he kind of remade this movie in The Guest. If you haven't seen The Guest, you should see The Guest immediately. It's like,
I need to see that one, yeah.
It's like the...
It has our man,
Dan Stevens.
Derek. It has Dan Stevens.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's basically the same thing. It's like, this guy is pushed to a point. He's got these lethal skills, and he goes to town. And so it's a story that Adam Wingard has told before. But I love that he's got these sort of horror sensibilities inside of an action movie. Like, I think about the sort of coldness of the characters in this. Like, there's a great moment in this movie, in Your Next, where when it's revealed one of the brothers is in on it and has orchestrated this huge mass murder of his family, and he has hired these masked killers, right? There's a bit where that's revealed, and he's talking to I think it's the wolf mask, and then that guy pulls an earbud out. He's like, "What?" And it's this
Yeah.
really cold moment of like, I was like, that guy has been like, I don't know what he's doing, listening to Bill Simmons, or he's like listening to like, he's been killing people all night and just like in his own world, like on his phone, listening to something. I'm like, that's the cold area, right? And then at the same time, Wingard is also playing with these sort of big gladiatorial feeling set pieces, like, oh man, she's setting up, like you said, the Home Alone traps. She's got a meat tenderizer that she pounds someone's head in with. Like he gives into these sort of like action instincts, and it's just so fun. Like, I have always been a gigantic fan of like the one man army, or in this case the one woman army movies. I'd love to see Rambo tear through people. That's like a fun Friday night to me. And this movie does that. It's like, I can't believe that no other horror movie has done this yet, because even in something like Ready or Not, where once Samara Weaving is game to sort of start fighting back, it still feels very reactionary. Like, she's someone who is, taking what she's given and using her environment, to dispatch these guys, right? Whereas the character in this movie, Aaron, is now actively a threat. It's like you took your foot off this like sleeping monster's throat, basically, and now she's just gonna start taking people out. And there's a hilarious line. Like, I love that the movie actually acknowledges this at one point. Somebody says to her, oh no, it's when the boyfriend at the end comes in and he goes, no one had any idea you would be so good at killing people.
Yeah.
It's like these paid killers, these like military guys have been running around using crossbows, and that stuff now looks like so rudimentary next to her like MacGyver murder methods. Just like, I took this meat tenderizer, I'm boiling a pot of water. I couldn't wait for that. It was like Chekhov's boiling pot of water. I couldn't wait for those Home Alone nail traps to get set off. This movie's a funhouse. It's a murdery funhouse.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something, because the moment that I was really like, it went from being like, this is interesting, this is fine, to be like, oh wait, I really am into this, was when she like actually like stabs the guy and he's like cries out in pain. Because you never hear that in these slasher movies. They're always like invincible, like they like, you get Michael Myers and he's down on the ground for a second, then it's like a music cue and he's gone. It's like, what? And that kind of plays up, but like he has like a moment where he's like in pain. It's like, oh wait, these guys are not invincible. It tells you right there that she is gonna fight back and it's gonna do some damage to these guys. And it's almost like if John Wick was in a like if
exactly.
Freddy Krueger is coming after John Wick, and it's like, wait a minute, this guy is more than a match for this killer, which is something that is not typical for the genre. And I thought that was a really interesting way to play it.
No, yeah, exactly. Like I got, it was like, yeah, instantaneous. I wasn't expecting her to be like the Rambo character, because like I thought, yeah, they present her as the main character, but I thought, yeah, it was going to be a little bit more like how the character in Ready or Not is, and like reactory, like you said, Matt. But her automatically switching on, it makes you like exactly how the family is, of like, what the hell is going on? How you know all this stuff, like and stuff, and just her push, not even like batting an eye at most parts, kind of like, yeah, like a John Wick, of just like with the crossbow, when they start shooting crossbow things at the beginning, of like, just like, okay, get down, everybody get down, and like, and just an automatic like reaction, and that definitely shows her character, and it did a very well job of showing who her character is like right away. And that's the thing that this movie did really well, is jump into the story really quickly. And I think that's why it's like, it didn't matter like if you didn't like, if the the dialogue or between the family members was kind of awkward and stuff like that, because that's not the point of this movie. The point of this movie is this survival outback girl like going after killers, or not even going after them, just them like attacking her, and her just like doing what she needs to do. And yeah, I mean, like, there was definitely moments where it's just like, oh man, like all the killers are the ones that get which is the flip of this movie. The killers are the ones that get the lucky breaks from her, so
Yes.
but because one moment that I was not expecting, and with no hesitation, she jumps out the window. Like like I was not expecting that. Like, and I was like, it was a blink and you missed it moment, because like I felt like the killer, because like she just jumps out the window, like no hesitation at all, and I really love that. And like yeah, like I now talk, which is the case of always on this podcast. The more and more I talk about it, the more and more I like it, and like um and I just wish that, yeah, like she didn't this, and the cop looks so stupid. Like he was the cop. He was like, without him saying any words, like just the way that he was acting, like of course you would shoot.
I'm like, as soon as that cop showed up and shot her, I was like, fucking ACAB, man. God damn it.
No, it was just like the fact that, yeah, like he just looked like the stupid idiot. And like, so yeah, when he got you know, hatcheted at the end, I was like, yeah, fine, he deserves
Yeah, good.
it.
I was like, oh no, this fucking cop who shot first. Oh no, okay.
You're hitting on something that I also really like about this movie is it sounds really dark, and it is, but it's also really funny. Like,
Yes.
as it gets more fucked up, it gets funnier. Like, look, at first, I will admit, when that garrote wire is revealed and slid across the door, and the sister runs and basically beheads herself on it, at first you're horrified, and then when you realize what's going on, like, you almost kind of laugh uncomfortably because you're like, that's sort of genius. And then when that's paid off, when the jerk brother has the arrow in his back and he tries to run out, and the Rottweiler hits the arrow, and he like is like, oh fuck, like it totally works. Like that joke works. And there are lots of funny bits like that in the movie, especially the ending with that axe trap finally going off, because you're like, okay, they spent all this time watching her set this thing up. We're waiting. It's like Chekhov's gun. When this thing's gonna go off, when's it gonna go off? And it goes off at the worst possible time. And that guy has like a silly, over the top expression, and it almost is like it's my favorite subgenre now. It's called splatstick, where it's like the funny splatter movie. It's like such a splatstick moment when that hatchet comes down and it just goes right to the red text at the end. It's just such a sweet, funny, like Looney Tune moment. It's great.
It's almost like the opening of Cabin in the Woods, where it just kind of like cuts to like, although like there's not a violent thing to it, but it just like kind of like bam, like it just hits you with like the title card. I fucking love that.
Yeah,
It's so
yeah.
good. And they use that title too on the in the beginning, when they're still sort of setting up the mystique of the movie, when the killer's, right, you're next on the neighbor's house, right? And it's just really effective. It like frames, really nicely frames that killer in the shot so that you get the whole text on screen, and you're like, oh, this is going to be one of these kinds of movies. And the next time you see it, it's actually quite funny.
Yeah. It definitely does a really good job of like setting up and then immediately subverting your expectations consistently throughout the movie, where it felt like a different movie when I started it and when I watched it.
Yeah, and like it definitely dark humor moments, like it too, of also that brother, like when the other brother, the one that like set up this whole thing, started stabbing the other brother, and he's just like, just die, like just like he's
You
just
know how
like,
hard this is
"No,
for me?
this is me." Yeah, that's why it's like at one point I'm like kind of like I don't know about let down, but I was expecting, like, especially with that moment that you said of like all of them essentially being very cold to like the death of the dad and stuff. I was expecting him to be very cold blooded too, but then for him to turn into like essentially like what he is like a spoiled rich kid that just wants more money because he doesn't want to share. It's kind of like it on both sides of like I like it, but then I'm like, oh, but I like that he was like kind of like at first presented as very cold blooded, and they were all psychos and psychotic and stuff. But yeah, like I just, and then the killing of the kills, they get more and more extravagant too, like because she's essentially, with knives and a meat tenderizer, which is like she grabbed it from the kitchen and stuff. But then at the end, you got a blender, like you. Like,
That was so great.
And I love
Which
that
is
she admits to that later too. Killed him with a blender. She says it's so cold. It's so good.
Mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. I love that moment, like with her confronting the boyfriend, and this woman is not going to like turn suddenly. It would have been awesome if that would have taken me by surprise. But for me, I'm like, she doesn't. She's none of this bullshit is gonna convince her to like accept your plan or go through with your plan or lie or whatever. No, she's like done, you know. So yeah, um, but yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I loved hearing that because I have recommended this movie to people and have like gotten like whoa like not into this, and it's clear they like didn't watch past the first act because
Mm.
it still feels like a home invasion movie, and I'm like, hey, look, I don't like home invasion movies either. All right. I think we're all I think we as adults all need to admit that we all fear the home invasion thriller. I think like nobody likes these movies. We're all just kind of pretending we do. And that's the thing is like this is not a home invasion movie. Don't be turned off by that. I love hearing that you both enjoyed it because it is. It's just like a fun, neat little calling card for Adam Wingard. I'm just so happy that this movie exists. I also like by the way too, it has a lot of horror lineage and horror heritage in the movie. The mom is played by Barbara Crampton from Reanimator and From Beyond. You've got other horror directors turning up for cameos, like the first boyfriend who gets the crossbow in his head is played by Ty West, who's the director of House of the Devil and The Innkeepers. He's got a new movie coming from A24 called X. That the trailer just came out today. So it's just cool. Like it's clearly a passion project. These are all friends, they're peers who, pop into each other's movies, help out in each other's movies. So it really is just like a fun, almost like a little mini horror convention of these kind of cool horror people.
Yeah, it definitely has those vibes where I'm kind of like looking at it, it's like none of these people are like even on the D list. I feel like these are all just kind of like people who like really, it's like the early like Evil Dead movies about how, like you were saying, how, it's just a bunch of friends who get together and really want to make a horror movie. And horror movies are really cheap to make. And so you can make really good ones if like you have a good script and you have good actors and stuff like that for like, not very much money. Like we said, it was $1 million to make this movie. And so I think that it has kind of, been slipping under the radar and just kind of been this kind of like hidden gem in the horror genre.
Yeah, and I think that's very like we've been saying throughout this whole movie is like, um, it kind of like presents itself as not as being a full horror movie and not a thriller, and that might have been a thing that kind of like capped it off from like being exposed a bit more because to me, like especially the poster, it looks like a horror movie, and I don't know about the trailers, but definitely like the poster looks like a horror movie, like like a and not like a more of a thriller that it is. And that's something that I think the marketing of Ready or Not did pretty well. I'm going to be comparing them, sorry, but yeah, did really well of like presenting that in the trailers and in the poster. Like the poster for Ready or Not seems definitely a lot more as like a action movie than it does a thriller, which is like this and Ready or Not kind of share. They're like that action thriller movie. So that might have been a kind of barrier for it as well.
Well, I think that for me, that really works to its advantage. That I liked, if I had known this was what it was going in, and I would have lost that like surprise factor, I still would have like really enjoyed it just as much as I did. But it gave me that little like, oh wow, this is what this is moment, and I thought that was so cool that it was able to kind of trick me like that.
Yeah, it definitely adds to like the enjoyment of it, but I think that like people like if people are presented a horror movie and they do not like horror, they're not going to go to it. But those same people might enjoy, are probably going to, if they like thrillers in general, they're going to enjoy this because it's a thriller, not a horror movie. So
100%. I also think the imagery on the posters of like, I think this movie was probably one of those movies, and I don't recall exactly, but like I'm sure it was marketed with like the masked killers. Like when I logged this on Letterbox, the image is of the Fox mask guy with like
Mhm.
blood splattered across his mask, and I'm like, yeah, that turns off your non-horror fans right away. Whereas I think in the marketing for something like this, if you fully avoid the masked people, you can just sell it as a straight thriller. Oh, somebody's trying to get in the house. They're shooting arrows. Boom. That's it. It doesn't alienate those people who normally wouldn't watch horror movies at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like because I watched this on Hulu, and like the front page of Hulu actually plays it a little bit better because it shows the main character like with in that final scene through the window like with an axe like looking more a badass and stuff like that. I think that gives a little bit more of a better vibe of what the movie is actually is, you know. So
Yeah.
Are you guys gonna have the Dwight Tilly band in your heads like all week now because of this movie? Is the magic song just gonna keep repeating in your minds?
Well, now I
oh
guess.
yeah, that's the one that was playing for the
Playing the neighbor's house.
neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like, why did you kill the? Oh, did they just kill the neighbors because they knew like they would be trying to run to the neighbor's
No, I
house
think
for
it was
help?
to trying to like build up this like scenario where like, oh, there's these killers, these hills have eyes. People just showed up and they're killing everybody. It was a totally random thing. It's not just this
Oh, so a
family. They were
bit more
killing
of
all
a
everybody up
alibi.
here.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
the boyfriend explains in the end like they had set up this big conspiracy. To which, by the way, if you really think about what he's saying, you're like, I don't know if that makes sense because he's telling Aaron she's supposed to be an innocent bystander. She was supposed to be a witness who had nothing to gain, right? An integral linchpin part of their plan. However, I'm with her. She says you had to have known that I was going to be at risk, that I could have gotten killed. Like, there was no way she was like not going to get brutally injured or maimed in some way. Like that he thought like, yeah, we'll just have, so she'll be fine. Nobody will mess with her.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, the
Yeah.
family all completely sucks, especially Crispin. Like her boyfriend, he is the worst. That's like one of the things. Like you ever like go and like meet like a significant other's family for the first time, and you're like, oh wait, these people kind of suck, and maybe the person I'm dating sucks. Maybe I need to rethink this. Like, and this is like the like ultimate like nightmare example of that.
Right? This is like the family. This is the in-law litmus test. Is this movie? You
Yeah.
show up, and you're like, maybe when those arrows come through the window, maybe you're relieved a little bit. The dinner's over.
Yeah, yeah, and I really do like that they show her innocence very early on of like she's just trying to like do good. She definitely doesn't like you get that sense of like she doesn't have like a bad bone in her body, you know. She's very caring for people. She's trying to like be nice to everybody and stuff like that and um yeah, it's definitely somebody like these movies go, like definitely somebody that does not deserve this at all, like kind of thing. So, so yeah, it definitely allows you to like her, like and like her very quickly, in order to like have that connection to her and care for her like from the start. Like you do not want her to be like harmed in any way or.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%, 100%. And once she sort of once she takes charge in the crisis situation, even just as a person, before you realize she's got her like Australian Crocodile Dundee moves where she can
Mhm.
like punch people, you're like, oh, she's just like a cool person. Like she knows what to do. She's keeping her head. She's trying to put the pressure on here. She wants to like board up the windows. She knows where to hide. Like this is somebody who's trying to help us. And then you're already on her side. And then once those killer instincts come out, you're like, whoa. Now I'm just kind of having fun watching her like tear through this house. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's really it's kind of crazy because this actor, her name is Sharni Vinson. She's Australian. I would have thought this movie would have put her like on the map, but she actually hasn't done much. Um, I would have thought for sure we would see her turn up in at least a bunch of horror movies or kind of like, you know, now we're getting more female-led action movies. I would have thought for sure she would have been a perfect choice for something like that. But no, she's kind of all but disappeared a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I looked up
Yeah.
a lot of the actors after this to like see. I was like, oh, do I know them from anything else? And it's like, no, not really. Like a lot of them just kind of fallen off the map. One of them, I guess, like tragically passed away a couple years ago. Because I looked him up. His last name is Tucci. I thought he might have been related to Stanley Tucci, but yeah, these guys kind of just vanished after this movie, and I was like, they're all really good. Like, what happened? You know?
Yeah, especially Joe Swanberg, who's a director, he's like an indie mumblecore guy. But who knew? Like, he's a fantastic actor. Like, he's such a dick in this movie. And
Was he the older brother?
Yes, he's the older brother who's
Mm-hmm.
like, you could do a lot with commercials in 30 seconds. Like, he plays that part so well. I thought the guy was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that also like them being so unlikable and so quickly, and also like her being so the Aaron being so capable, and they're just like complete lack of capability, like you just, and not listening to her from the beginning very much like gets you a lot more off of their side, and like to the point where like you're questioning for yourself, like, do I feel bad that these people are dying, like they're kind of asking for it, this woman is trying to help them, trying to like point them in the right direction to survive them, and then they just are like, killing themselves off like lemmings, kind of thing,
Like,
just
like
listen
when
to
they're
it.
like dying, and somebody's got an arrow in his head, and he's just like. They're like arguing about who can do like a quicker 40-minute dash or whatever. He's like, I've got an arrow in me. That doesn't affect your legs. I was like, what is going on with these horrible people? And it really does, yeah, like you said, Ariel, like really, you don't root for them. You're like almost rooting for the killers, like, because you're like, yeah, kill these people. They suck so much. And then you find out they're in it with the killers. Like, okay, cool. Now I can like really root for like the main girl. Like it's really just, yeah, it does a really good job of getting you on her side.
Yeah, and this movie definitely like plays into, like, you could rewatch this a lot. And I'm very interested in rewatching it now, knowing, what happens at the end, and kind of like listening to dialogue that, certain characters say, to kind of guess like because I know, like, for example, the running one, like the youngest brother kind of like was the one to suggest it, so you kind of get that sense of like, oh, he's pushing it for his own reason, he knows it's there, kind of thing, so it's like, yeah, or knows
Yeah.
something's gonna happen. I don't know if he knew exactly that was there, but he knew that like they are waiting for them, like,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
he was counting
Yeah.
on them like opening fire, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like he's
Let
like,
them handle
let's Scooby Doo this group. Let's split them up.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on the movie here, guys, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I just also I wanted to call out the fact that, like, I also love these like ritzy sort of like Clue house kind of movies. Like, again,
Oh.
if you're not, it's just like that. Like, if you're in a fanciful house with like where your nearest neighbor is like 2 miles away and there's a dinner party going on, there's some shit about to go down. Someone's gonna die, or you're gonna play a game of death, or something weird is gonna happen. I just love I think this is like a little scene subgenre is the Clue House movies,
Yeah.
as I'll call them. I think we need more of them. I would love to see more of these types of movies. And also, I wanted to ask actually both of you a question. This is like a cinematic pet peeve of mine, but whenever I see food in a movie, if the food is not consumed, I immediately get concerned with the food. I'm like, nobody's eating this. Like when Kevin in Home Alone makes the mac and cheese and then he just leaves it. I'm like, oh my God, you're just leaving the whole mac and cheese. What's going on? Um, when that whole table of food gets knocked over by the math guy when he's mad, I was like, look at all the food. I look at the bread
Oh.
basket and I get like, oh no. Is that just me?
Matt, it's not real food. It's
Oh.
glue and it's other stuff. So
Oh,
you're
God.
okay.
Sometimes it's
fine.
real food. The food in
Sometimes it's
Hawkeye
real
was
food.
real. Elena was eating real mac and cheese with sriracha. She's like, make sure you throw a real bottle of sriracha at me. Like
Oh.
Bill Murray would
Okay.
eat real cake in
amazing.
But
yeah, they'll help spit buckets,
Yeah. But if they have screen food, it's usually not real food. So yeah, so they make it look good. Yeah.
I get what you're saying though. Like like, oh man, that looks so good. What a waste,
Oh, yeah, I feel bad for the character, especially like Kevin in Home Alone. Not to talk about Home Alone, but like Home Alone, oddly enough, kind of plays into this movie where we're setting traps for people that are breaking in. That's the thing I always think of. I think of Kevin making the mac and cheese. He went through all that. He sets himself a candlelit dinner, and then he has to walk away. And I always feel really bad for him. It's like an unnecessary layer of me feeling bad. Like I already sympathize with this young boy whose life is in danger. I don't also need to feel bad that he's missing dinner, you know?
Well, it's like in Harley Quinn, where her whole like objective in Birds of Prey is just to eat that one egg sandwich, and she just can't. That's what that got me. And then when she gets it at the end, you're just like such catharsis. We're like, yes, you've been wanting this delicious sandwich the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's got the eggs, the cheese. Like, yes, go for it,
Dude, 100%. That shot where that bacon, egg, and cheese goes flying out of her hands hurts me. I see that shot and I'm like, no.
I think it's because, like, everybody. I think food and eating food, and that's why, like, food is such a coming together kind of thing, is because it's the one of the most natural things that we do, and we're everybody eats, so it's very much something that if you want to gain sympathy fairly quickly, you include food in some way, either people eating or in this case people losing food or not being able to eat food and stuff. So yeah,
Totally right. It ups the vulnerability. Like you just made me think of the part in Raging Bull where Joe Pesci is at home eating the spaghetti and then Robert De Niro comes in and beats the shit out of him in front of his friend. You kind of already now feel a little worse because he was in the middle of like eating this giant spaghetti dinner. I think you're onto something.
What are you doing? I'm trying to get it. Come on, get at it.
It ups the vulnerability.
yeah, not the example I was thinking of, but yeah.
That's a good point. I never really thought of it that way, but that's a really good point. Well, all right, guys. I guess that does it for us here on Underrated. We've been really honored to have you on, man. So, Matt, why don't you tell everybody about your show and where they can listen to you?
Thanks. Yeah. And by the way, now that I've been here, we're definitely we've had Derek on and we're going to have Derek on again, but I think we should try and have all of the Underrated podcast cast, the undercast, if you will,
yes,
our show. We're the Matt and Mark Movie Show. You can find us wherever, all the big platforms, your Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Check us out on Instagram at the Matt and Mark Movie Show. We're very active there. It's a show that I started with my friend of 20 plus years, Mark. Yes, I'm old. I started it with my friend Mark. We've been watching movies together for that long, and it's really just us watching a movie, reviewing stuff. We go into movie news sometimes, but we really just have a blast kind of talking to each other, catching up with each other, and talking movies. We mostly talk new releases. We just came out with a bit of a Scream retrospective in honor of the new Scream, and we're going to be reviewing that. So definitely stop by and check us out, especially if you're into genre stuff, action stuff, horror, cult. We'd love to have you. The Matt and Mark Movie Show.
Yeah, and if you guys like what I like at all, definitely check that out, because like they always post their recs. They always do their recs at the end of the episode, and a lot of the time we are in alignment. I'm always commenting on Instagram like, oh my god, you loved Cop Shop, I loved Cop Shop, it's just like stuff like that. So
thanks
yeah,
to
check
this
them out.
podcast,
Sure,
I found they came together, which I love. So thank you all for that.
I'm glad you enjoyed it, man. Like I love that movie, and that's the goal. Like, is to like get these movies that people might not have seen, they came together, or you're next. And so if we can bring these movies to more people, that's what we want to do. But yeah, we have been Underrated. If you guys liked us, to go ahead and subscribe on whatever podcasting app you're listening to. We're on all the apps. We're on YouTube. If my camera ever works, I show up there sometimes, but usually it doesn't, as anybody who's watching now can tell. But yeah, if you can review us, we have a Patreon, or just send us an email. If you guys we're always looking for recommendations for movies. If you have a favorite underrated movie, let us know. Just send us an email at undercastcompany@gmail.com. But yeah, thank you guys again for listening, and I'll see you in another life.
It's really amazing.